Okay, do you remember how disappointed you were by Star Trek V? Were you more or less disgusted with Star Trek V than you were with Star Trek Into Darkness? In the end, the lesson I got from Star Trek V was that you really need to wait a while after a movie's released before you watch it. Because when I watched it back in the aughts with with my first wife and the little kids, I really enjoyed it, and I wasn't expecting that. We were marathoning all the movies at the time, so that's also when I saw Star Trek Insurrection for the first time, and I enjoyed it too. I probably would not have enjoyed it if I'd have seen it in the movie theater. I think with the benefit of hindsight, it's worth making another ranking video. Okay, so why should we have another ranking video? Doesn't YouTube already have enough? Well, I think it's reasonable for me to make one because I need to establish my science fiction credentials. I don't have a lot of books published. I've got this one. And I don't have a lot of content on my channel. So by taking a position on something that you've already seen, you can get an idea what kind of writer I am and decide for yourself if you want to read my stuff, watch my videos, whatever. And as always, you're welcome to go straight to my writing. Links are in the description. So in determining what's the right best order to put these movies in, I'm not considering the importance to the franchise of the movie. There are a few that are very important because of what they did or when they came out, and the story isn't really part of it. So instead, I'm just going to look at the movies themselves. So is the story good, even if it's presented badly? How well is the story presented? Are there good character moments for all of the main cast? That is why we watch these things, right? When it comes to Starfleet values, are they represented well? And if there's conflict, is that conflict portrayed well? And of course, the three most important questions. Is it good science fiction? Is it good Star Trek? And does it have rewatch value? So all rankings are inherently subjective. Mine aren't any different. I also think the odd-numbered movie curse was just an anomaly that happened back during the 80s. When you think about it, it's really difficult to sandwich a movie between these even-numbered movies because they were so good. I mean, you got, The Wrath of Khan, you've got the one with the whales, and then you've got the send-off to the original cast. Any movie that fits between those, we're not going to look at it so well. I do believe the odd-numbered movie curse ends with Star Trek 7, but we'll talk about that later. With all that said, let's start with the bad movies. Number 13, Star Trek Into Darkness. Okay, so it was already offensive to cast a Mexican to play an Indian. When they put Benedict Cumberbatch in that role, they just whitewashed the hell out of it, and they should not have done that. Contrary to what J.J. Abrams thought at the time, flipping the Kirk and Spock roles compared to Wrath of Khan made this movie worse, not better. And by doubling down on the lens flares, man, seriously? The story wasn't good, and it wasn't told well. I will never watch this movie again, even if I date a woman who hasn't seen it and wants to know why I think it's so bad. I'm never watching this movie again. Number 12, Star Trek. So this is the first J.J. Abrams movie, and it does really come off more as a Star Wars audition reel. But it was important because it showed the studio that there is still an audience for big-budget Star Trek. Without this movie, we probably wouldn't have the current wave of shows, and I'm actually enjoying all the new Trek, to be honest. But J.J. Abrams made a big mistake by taking Vulcan out right away. And then he didn't follow it up in any of the sequels. Like, we could have had a movie following Vulcan refugees trying to settle somewhere. We could have had that kind of story. But there's not a lot of room in a theatrical context to really be able to follow that. So it just feels like a big bunch of doo-doo. The story itself was pretty basic, but it was told really well. And in hindsight, the lens flares weren't that bad. All that said, it's still a bad movie. I'm not rewatching it anytime soon. Number 11, Star Trek Nemesis. So, setting up the search for Data was way too obvious, and it ended up cheapening Data's sacrifice. And with all the stuff that they cut so that they could have that sequence, And what the hell's with all these remans? How are we 10 movies and 4 shows in, and we're only just now finding out that Romulans have a slave class? Now, I don't accept that. No. I thought the Picard clone idea was good, but since there was no basis for it anywhere in the series, this story didn't get any traction with it. Now, the story itself was told really well. As long as you don't think about all the great stuff that got left out, that would have made it a much better movie. And I don't care if this is controversial, I did not approve of Riker and Troy marrying. X's should stay X's. It was great science fiction. It was terrible Star Trek. Number 10, Star Trek Beyond. So I thought Star Trek Beyond was actually good Star Trek, and I really enjoyed seeing an NX-class starship on the big screen. Of course, Enterprise is my favorite of all the Star Trek shows. I thought the action was great, the guest stars were great, and I really appreciated the tribute to Leonard Nimoy. I even cried a little bit. But overall, it really just feels like a Star Trek episode. It's the second movie in a row to fail to follow up on the Vulcan getting destroyed in the first movie. So it suffers a lot because of that. Number 9, Star Trek The Motion Picture. Now, this movie had a lot of production issues, and the original theatrical release had even some unfinished effects shots. It was still very profitable, and that's what makes it important, because despite all of the issues, it proved that Star Trek movies were profitable. In the future, they would reduce the budget, basically print money off of Star Trek movies. The story is fundamentally good, and it's an excellent Star Trek story. It's just told very badly. The only rewatch value here is sport. It's like an endurance challenge to try to watch the whole movie all the way through without getting bored or falling asleep. And I do want to do that at least one more time before I die, or get too old to be physically capable of finishing the movie. So the next group of movies on this list, I consider good Star Trek movies. They're not great movies, but they're all enjoyable. Number 8, Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Yep, I said it. It is not the worst of the Star Trek movies. Those ones that I just listed are all worse than this one. It is the worst of the good Star Trek movies, though. For one thing, we didn't need 2 comedies in a row. This movie should have been seriouser. More serious? There are also a lot of production difficulties here. ILM was busy making something else. I want to say it was Back to the Future Parts 2 and 3. You can look that up if you want. Without ILM, they had to go to some untested special effects companies, and it really shows. Some of the effect shots in this movie are actually unfinished. The studio interfered, preventing the story from going where they intended it to go. There was also a writer's strike, which made editing really difficult and improvising on set impossible, which means some of the crappy dialogue is there because the writers were on strike. Now, the studio could have said, let's wait 6 months or so when ILM will be available and when the writer's strike will be over, and then make this movie, and we probably would have gotten a really good movie. It was Shatner's directorial debut. Despite that, I think he did a good job. Overall, it is frustrating to find out that Spock has a brother, does nothing to the story, and we're not even going to talk about Michael. At the heart of it, Sybok and Kirk's different points of view on their pain are 2 sides of the same mental health coin, and I have quoted both of them in group sessions, in rehab, and in IOP, and in recovery meetings, and helped other people by doing so. That's some serious value from what's supposed to be a bad movie. Dealing with the nature of gods, that was fun. As an added bonus, after watching this movie, my 3-year-old daughter spent the next couple of weeks asking everyone she met, why does God need a starship? That was awesome.
What does God need with a starship?
Number 7, Star Trek Insurrection. The main issue with Insurrection is that it really felt like it was just a big budget episode, just like Star Trek Beyond did. But this was the first of all the movies that felt like that. It's not really a bad thing, but it's not what you're looking for in a feature film. There were great character moments, but there was also a lot of cheap humor. And I thought at one point Dr. Crusher and Troy were actually going to kiss, and I didn't want to see that. Of course, Data is very special. We love him. And when Star Trek Picard started throwing back, talking about Picard and Data's relationship, they focused on Measure of a Man and Nemesis, and I really think they failed us, because this is the movie that is essential to understand the relationship between Picard and Data. And in that respect, this movie actually sets up Data's death in the next movie very well. It has great rewatch value. I always enjoy watching it, but I rarely choose it. Number 6, Star Trek Generation. Now, this movie was obviously very important because it was the first Next Generation movie, and it demonstrated that you don't need Kirk to have a good Star Trek movie. It did its job effectively. It gave us a big story on a big screen with a big cast, and you just can't understate how important this movie is. It was good enough. It's enjoyable. I like watching it. And without this movie being what it was, I don't know that the franchise ever could have returned, later when they made Star Trek. We didn't need the handoff from the old cast. This movie would have been better without it. We didn't need Kirk. I also didn't appreciate the Enterprise B captain being portrayed as incompetent. And for reasons I'll discuss in a different video, he should have been black. The movie does bog down in the Nexus sequence, and there's a lot of opportunities here to address addiction as a disease that they missed, and really feel that brings the movie down. I thought that before I became an alcoholic. I thought destroying the Enterprise D was a good move. It definitely opened it up to give us a much bigger theatrical Enterprise for the next generation, which they deserved. It also ends the odd-numbered curse, because it was a good movie when it came out. It followed Star Trek VI very effectively, but changing the cast and making a good movie in this spot broke the curse. So the last movies we're going to talk about, obviously, is all the rest. I think these are all the great Star Trek movies. They're all filled with great character moments. They each have a theme that is relatable and is explored well. Each story is told very well. There are no misfires. And each story builds on previous work. Number 5. Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Now, this is the movie that established the odd-numbered movie curse. Let's just face the fact that it was impossible to follow The Wrath of Khan. We knew as soon as The Wrath of Khan was over that there would be a next movie, and that it would be about bringing Spock back to life somehow. So we already knew that was going to happen. The problem is in the details, and it's really hard to make a great movie when the audience already knows what the movie's going to be about. So, all things considered, I think Leonard Nimoy did a great job directing this one. I wish they had not put the destruction of the Enterprise in the trailer. They should have made that something we had to go to the movie theater to see. It also has the best character moment in all of the films.
What you had to do. What you always do. Turn death into a fighting chance to live.
I appreciate that they subverted the previous movies' needs of the many bit and highlighted the value and importance of friendship and loyalty. And this might be controversial, but I'm glad David died. His story was over, and he clearly wasn't Kirk's son, not after all that unethical crap he did with the Genesis project. I'm sorry Kirk didn't get to know him and have a good relationship, but it was right for David to leave the series at this time. That said, we should take a moment of silence for Merrick Butrick, who played David. He succumbed to AIDS in the 90s after appearing in a Next Generation episode. I'm glad David died, but the world lost a beautiful soul when Merrick Butrick died. Number 4, Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Okay, so this is the first Star Trek movie that people who weren't Trekkies liked. It's a great fish out of water comedy. I mean, come on, it's just a great movie. It is too bad the phrase double dumbass on you didn't join the popular lexicon, although I have used it.
Double dumbass on you!
But, I mean, come on, just look at this movie. Number 3, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. So this is the movie that laid the blueprint for all the rest of the movies with the original cast. Low budget, intensive prop reuse, creative storytelling, throwing back to previous work. In this case, they went all the way back to the TV series. The themes of friendship and aging in this movie continue to resonate with new audiences, and the build-up to Spock's death gave most of the original cast a chance to showcase their love of the man. The aftermath, of course, gives everybody a chance. This is just a great movie. Number 2, Star Trek First Contact. A lot of people think they should have made this movie instead of Generations. I disagree. This movie's in the right place in the sequence. They just should have made a better Generation. This may be controversial, but I think Jonathan Frakes is a better director than Leonard Nimoy, and it really shows in this movie. By showcasing the Borg assimilating the Enterprise crew members, we really get to see how the trauma of being assimilated continues to affect Picard. There's not really a lot else to say. It's Star Trek with zombies, and it just works in every possible way. You have great guest stars, even. There's only one Star Trek movie with better guest stars. Number 1, Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country. There isn't really anything to say about this one. It has the most rewatch value. Whenever I want to watch a Star Trek movie, 9 times out of 10, this is the one I pick. It has a perfect balance of mystery, comedy, and an action-packed climax. Best line in the movie.
Target that explosion and fire.
By revisiting the previous themes of friendship, they give a proper send-off to the old crew, and no further appearances are necessary. No reboots are necessary either. So I don't know if you noticed this, but in this movie, at no point is any character ever successful on their own. Every character, when they have any kind of a victory, big or small, it doesn't matter, They always do it with the help of one or more of their friends. And that really gets at fundamentally what Star Trek has always
Give
been
real
about.
money if he'd shut up. Doubt it.
Or not to be.
Thank you for watching this video. If you like it, please like and subscribe and ring the bell. You know the drill, like you do on every channel. If you'd like to support the channel directly, you can join my Patreon. It's just $3 a month right now, and I'll put your name in the credits. There's no credits right now. I think you know what you need to do. Of course, I am a science fiction writer. That's the whole point of the channel. You can go to Amazon and you can buy one of my books. That will also directly support the channel. Of course, links are in the description. Blah, blah, you know this. Everybody else says most of the same things, but I say it better.